Why the USA economy is facing a crisis. Politicians promise solutions, but the reality often tells a different story. Inflation is surging, debts are piling up, and inequality is at its highest in decades. Can a new leader like Donald Trump truly change this trajectory, or are these problems far beyond what politics alone can fix? Democrats raise taxes and increase debt. Republicans cut taxes and promote growth. These are the typical stereotypes, but does history confirm them? Take Barack Obama's presidency, for example. He inherited an economy devastated by the 2008 Great Recession. Obama increased government spending to stimulate the economy, which led to rising debt. However, his policies ultimately ensured economic recovery and steady growth, albeit with higher debt. Compare this to Joe Biden, who took office during the COVID-19 pandemic, leading to large-scale support measures, including business and population stimulus. This approach has been criticized for increasing the national debt and inflation, but supporters argue it was necessary to restore the economy. On the other hand, Donald Trump cut taxes for corporations and the wealthy, believing it would stimulate the economy and create jobs. However, his policies resulted in a $7.8 trillion increase in national debt, and trade wars, such as with China, disrupted global supply chains, impacting the cost of goods. Each party follows its own economic agenda, but despite the slogans and promises, many problems remain unresolved. Economic reality is often far more complex than political rhetoric. When Donald Trump took office, his campaign promises sounded enticing. He promised to bring back jobs, lower taxes, and boost economic growth. And indeed, during his early years in office, the economy showed positive results. Unemployment decreased, the stock market grew, and GDP increased. However, there are important factors to consider behind this success. For instance, Trump cut taxes for the wealthy and large corporations, believing this would stimulate economic growth and create jobs. But in practice, many large corporations used these tax breaks to buy back their own shares rather than create new jobs. Additionally, despite the economic growth, Trump faced a significant increase in national debt. Over the course of his 4 years in office, U.S. debt grew by $7.8 trillion. And while the economy was growing, the debt continued to rise at an alarming rate. Another key aspect of his economic policy was the trade wars, especially with China. These measures led to higher tariffs, which significantly raised prices for American consumers and threatened the global trade order. So, while Trump's policies brought short-term economic successes, the long-term consequences of his actions were far from ideal. The economic crisis the U.S. is facing today didn't emerge overnight. It's the result of a multitude of factors that have built up over decades, many of which are linked to systemic issues. Let's start with inflation. In recent years, the prices of food, housing, and fuel have surged. In 2022, inflation in the U.S. reached 9.1%, the highest level in 40 years. While Biden and the Federal Reserve are trying to tackle this, rising prices continue to hit the average American hard. A key factor contributing to the economic crisis is the national debt. By 2023, the U.S. debt surpassed $33 trillion. That's an astronomical amount, and paying interest on this debt is draining more and more funds from the government. The U.S. is currently spending over $500 billion a year just to service its debt. But there's also inequality. While the wealthiest individuals and corporations are raking in profits, millions of Americans still have limited access to quality healthcare and education. More than 50% of Americans can't afford necessary medical treatment, and housing costs continue to climb, making it unaffordable for many families. This brings us to the question, what if the economic crisis isn't just a random mistake, but a structural problem that requires a comprehensive solution? Donald Trump is back on the political stage, actively promoting his agenda for 2024. But can his promises truly help the U.S. in its current economic crisis? One of the key pillars of his policy is tax cuts. Trump promises to lower taxes for the middle class and businesses, which he believes will stimulate investment and create new jobs. In the past, such measures helped the economy grow, but also significantly increased the national debt, which is now at record levels. Another major point in Trump's agenda is tightening immigration policies. He argues that reducing the flow of migrants will increase job opportunities for Americans. However, experts warn that this could lead to labor shortages in sectors like agriculture and construction. Another initiative is supporting industry and bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. Trump proposes new tariffs on imports to protect American companies. However, past trade wars have shown that such measures often result in higher prices for consumers. Can these initiatives truly change the economic situation, or will they be temporary fixes that exacerbate long-term issues? The answers depend on the ability of the new administration to adapt to current realities and avoid past mistakes. The economic crisis in the U.S. cannot be explained solely by the mistakes of individual administrations. The problem runs much deeper. It's rooted in the system itself. First, political polarization. In recent decades, the divide between Democrats and Republicans has become so intense that most of the time is spent arguing rather than finding solutions. Critical reforms are delayed or outright blocked, leaving the economy without systemic management. Second, income inequality. Today, the top 1% of Americans control more than 30% of the nation's wealth. Meanwhile, millions of families struggle to make ends meet, paying for rent, medical bills, and education. For instance, the cost of university tuition has risen by 213% over the past 30 years, making higher education unaffordable for many. By comparison, countries like Germany and Canada demonstrate a more sustainable model, where bipartisan agreements and strong social programs help mitigate economic imbalances. These issues are so deeply entrenched that simply changing the leader won't solve them. To turn things around, the U.S. needs to fundamentally rethink its approach to economic management. Today, the U.S. economy faces deep systemic issues that cannot be solved overnight. The question is, will the country choose the path of reform, or will it continue to deepen its struggles? One possible scenario is the path of reform. This would require narrowing the income gap, investing in infrastructure and education, and stabilizing the national debt. For example, in the 1950s, similar measures helped the U.S. experience an economic boom as infrastructure projects, like the creation of the interstate highway system, spurred growth. However, such changes would demand bipartisan cooperation, which seems almost impossible in today's politically polarized environment. The other scenario is a deepening crisis. If disagreements between political parties continue to paralyze the government and reforms are delayed, the economy could face even more severe challenges. Rising debt obligations, increasing bankruptcies, and the mass immigration of skilled workers. These scenarios are not just abstract, they are already affecting millions of Americans. Today, 1 in 3 households struggles to pay their bills. Housing prices continue to climb, while wages fail to keep up with inflation. All of this creates a sense of economic instability that impacts everyone. The future of the U.S. depends not only on its leaders, but also on the country's willingness to rethink its priorities. Changes are still possible, but the window of opportunity is closing fast. Write in the comments what you think the next 4 years hold for America, and be sure to watch this video. You will definitely enjoy it.